Hello and welcome back to another guest episode of Straight from the Drafts. Very excited for this one. Hello, Abby.
Yay! Hi, Neo. How are you?
Good, thank you. Abby is joining us as a pal and a podcast guest today. We've known each other for 2 years? 3 years. I can't math. Two,
I
three.
think I'm trying to count like retreats. Like we did two and we didn't do one. So yeah, three years I think it is now.
That's gone so fast.
I know. Yeah, it is. That's crazy.
Would you like to introduce yourself as the business is now, and then we'll do the whole backstory separately.
Yeah. Okay, so I am Abby. I own a business called Paper and Word. We are the UK's first and currently still only fantasy bookshop.
Woo!
So we're independent. We're an independent bookshop, and we have a physical bookshop on the Wirral in the UK. And yeah, currently, which is still wild to believe, we're the only independent bookshop that focuses solely on fantasy. So there are a few around that do, sci-fi as well, or horror, or something like that. But we're the only ones that do it exclusively. So yeah, that is the bulk of who I am, what I do. We have a lot of things that sprout off from that. We do events, we have different memberships and book clubs and things like that. But fantasy and fantasy books is my all day, my everyday.
Your store is stunning.
Yay, thank you. It is pretty magical. I feel like we did intentionally choose a slightly different feeling bookshop, I guess. We wanted it to feel more like you were stepping into a magical personal library rather than, a normal bookshop, something white or Waterstonesy or something like that. We wanted it to feel very different, and I think it does do that. Everybody comments on how cozy it is.
Yeah, you smashed it. I mean, not surprised at all with all that work that you put in. I don't want to spoil the entire episode. So, when we met 2, 3, an unknown number of years ago, your business looked rather different.
Yes.
And I guess that whole story is today's episode. So where do you want to start? How far back do we go? Do we go to when we met, or do you want to go to the start of Paper and Word?
Let's go to the start. We'll keep the early stages brief. I mean, I never intended to set up a business. That was never really
The
the
classic.
plan. I got, at the time, what was my dream job. I had a really awesome new job in a design agency in Liverpool, and I was very, very excited. At the time, I lived quite a way away, so I was going literally from one end of Merseyrail to the other for my commute, which was wonderful for me. I think I might be the only person that ever enjoyed the commute. It was lovely. It was 45 minutes each way, and it was just me sat on the train in the same spot reading my book. And I did find quite quickly, though, as somebody that has always been quite obsessed with books and a collector of lovely editions, that they were getting pretty messed up in my bag. So I looked for a way to kind of keep them safe. And then I found that book sleeves were a thing. At the time, there was very, very few people making them, and the ones that I could find within the UK were not to my tastes. So, being, a bit of a dab hand from a craft point of view, I thought I'd start making my own. I did, and they were cute, and everyone started asking me for them, and it just sort of snowballed into a book sleeve business. And we did really well. It continuously snowballed. Originally I thought if I can just counterbalance the amount of money I spend on books, so that the books kind of felt like they were free, then I would be more than happy with that. But it quickly became quite a lot more. So after 2 years at what, I think it was 2 years, I'm pretty sure it was 2 years at the job that I loved, but it became too much to do both. And so I had to make a decision as to which was more important. And I had been winding down my time, like reducing the hours I worked at my other job. And I was on kind of 3 to 4-ish days a week at that point, but it was still nowhere near enough. And so I decided to hand my notice in. The timing felt perfect at the time. Looking back was inconvenient. My notice period was 3 months, and I handed it in Christmas 2019.
Oh, no.
Quick maths tells you that that my notice ended 2 weeks after lockdown started. So I literally shut my laptop and never saw or spoke to anyone there ever again. We were like, oh, we'll meet at the pub in a couple of weeks when this all blows over. Yeah, did not. In fact, I still have that laptop hiding under my bed because I never gave it back and feel too terrible to use it. And now it's like too far gone to tell them I still have it. So it's just like, a little grey rectangle of shame under my bed. So yeah, it did really, really well. And, we'd added a few other things that at that point we had like some memberships. I worked from home. Continued to do well through COVID times, and actually, it did work well that I guess I was forced to be home all the time because I could put everything into it. After a few years of doing that, I kind of wanted more change. I like change, I like projects, and so we added other products in, and that was around the time that we met, was when we were just talking about adding other products in. And I remember that one of my Wouldn't It Be Cool lifts, which was one of the things that Alice, who hosted the retreat, which is where we first met, was one of her favourite tasks, I guess, to give to people, wasn't it? It was to write a list of wouldn't it be cool if. And there was a few things in that were products and working with businesses and, specific things that we did do by the end of that year. So yeah, we introduced some other products and that worked really well. And then I thought, I'd be happy after that, I guess, and realised that it still didn't quite hit the spot. And the thing that was missing, the thing that felt like we'd begun with and slowly had been taken away, was the book element. So yeah, we said, wouldn't it be cool if we opened a bookshop? And actually, when we sat down and did the maths, it seemed achievable. And then once I'd decided it seemed achievable, I couldn't possibly let go of that idea. So it became my new obsession. And here we are. I think it took us probably 2 years, I guess, from saying, yes, let's definitely do it, to actually then doing it and being open, maybe just shy of that.
Yeah.
And yeah, it's been thriving. We've been open for 4 months now, and it's been beyond all expectations.
It's so incredible what you've built, and we can get into the details of it. But when you say, or when I say what you've built, I literally mean that as well, just for everyone listening. Abby and her husband Liam literally built it was a shell in the end. We can get into how it ended up being a shell, but every bookshelf, every the wood of the till, the whole thing was very much a team. Do it yourself. I don't know. I'm so impressed by Liam's brain working out the shelving, and it's just...
I have no idea how he did that. Yeah, I have no idea. And do you know what? I think something that we do quite a lot of us is just assume we can do something, having never done it before. There is no evidence to say that we could do this. And we were like, yeah, we can build an entire bookshop, with just sheets of wood. We can totally do that. And we did. We did do that with YouTube and hopes and prayers. We got there. But yeah, we definitely had a journey. Yeah, the bookshop, once we'd found the place that we wanted, it did not go to plan, but it was worth it in the end.
Yeah, I'm so glad you now have the privilege, the joy of hindsight, because I imagine this time last year was you probably would never have felt well, maybe not even this time last year, because that's still quite early on. Actually, we were had the Kickstarter finished? Where are we at?
The Kickstarter just finished. Yeah, so the Kickstarter, we opened the Kickstarter the middle of February, and it ran for, I can't remember whether it was 2 or 3 weeks, but yeah, we decided to do a Kickstarter because although the business already existed and the building, we had chosen our building, we knew it needed a lot of work because originally it was a florist, and obviously turning that into a bookshop is going to take money. But also, books are really expensive, even for us, and to stock an entire shop full of books is just a huge expense. We get at best about 50% off the RRP, and obviously being an independent, we get the full sticker price that's on the back of the book. We can't offer cheaper books like the Works can, or anybody like that. So we're talking sort of between £4 to £7 for a paperback. And then about, £10 to £15 for a hardback for us to buy. So filling an entire shop, which we estimate we can fit about 5,000 books in. It's a lot of money. It's a lot of money. So we decided to do a Kickstarter for it, and which was very successful. We raised, I think it was £26,000 altogether, which was great. But that ran for either 2 to 3 weeks, and it finished at the end of February. And then it was probably around this time, actually, maybe, give or take a few weeks, that we then found out that the building had a lot of issues and everything was going to take longer than we expected. We did originally plan to open in the May, which was why we kind of did the Kickstarter with the timing that we did. It took us until mid-November to actually open because of all of the building work that we needed.
And it was incredibly frustrating because you guys started the work literally weeks before you ended up opening the doors, didn't you? Because it was all hold-ups on other people's side. Like when you actually got your hands on it, you guys were crazy fast.
Yeah. We just waited so long. We were so fed up of waiting. Yeah, so we started a little bit of work around this time. So after the Kickstarter had finished, we knocked down the building. Originally, it was kind of split into two. There was like a half wall, I guess, between. So we knocked that down. And we also knew that there were about 4 layers of false ceiling in the front half only. The back half was just normal ceiling. The front half had like these multiple layers of ceiling. So yeah, we got in with a sledgehammer pretty quick and just started knocking the shit out of everything. Am I allowed to swear?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, so we started ripping the place to pieces, and we paid for a survey to be done as well because there was a lot of concerns about a leaky roof. And by the time we'd knocked all of the main stuff down, which included the 5 layers of ceiling, which, we had like a plastic one, and then there was just a wooden kind of 70s like slatted one, right the way back to the original butcher ceilings that still had like the meat hooks and stuff. It was extreme. Yeah, by the time we got to that point, that was when the survey came back and the whole place was fucked. So there was a lot of backwards and forwards then between us and the landlord. We needed, in the end, a new roof, a whole new roof. But as well as that, the brick had to come down from the top kind of quarter of the building, I guess, right the way down to the tops of the windows. The floor all had to come out and up. A lot of the glass had to be replaced. The bricks, because we're in a conservation area, had to be cleaned and numbered and then put back in the same place. It was a whole thing. Yeah, there was a big chunk of time where we could just see sky from the inside. It was just daylight. There was no roof, no brick, no nothing. It was wild. But we got there, and now that it's done, we know that it's fine. We know that everything has been touched, everything's been replaced, the building is safe and it is fine, it is dry.
Important for books.
Absolutely. And we kind of said this at the beginning when the landlord was like, oh no, it's fine. We were like, how can it be fine if it's raining inside? Like for a florist, we kind of get that doesn't really matter, but for literally everybody else, it really does.
Yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah, it is a problem. And they were almost sort of saying like it was my issue. And we were like, well, try and get someone else to move in because you're going to have the same conversation. So yeah, it was a lot of work, and that was completely out of our control. And for many, many months we were told, with next week you'll have the keys, next week it will be sorted, next week everything will be agreed, or it will be finished, or this will be done. And that week by week conversation happened from March to October, and it was the most painful time period of my life because I am not a very patient person when it comes to waiting for stuff. And if they'd have said at the beginning, oh, it's going to take 6 months, then you can prepare for that and you can deal with that. But being told constantly it will be next week was so painful. So then when we did finally managed to take over, it was clean and dry and empty. Yeah, we were so done with waiting, we didn't want to sleep. So we just pretty much lived in there for 6 weeks to finish everything we needed to. We did the plastering, we had it rewired, we laid the floor ourselves, we built absolutely everything that's in there ourselves, we painted everything inside and out. We had somebody that did our signs, we didn't do that. But everything else was pretty much done by us, and we had a team of volunteers for painting. You were one of them.
I I was only there for a bit of a day, so I'm not taking credit, but I do like to point out I sanded that shelf.
Honestly, everything helped because it felt so much bigger than us by that point. It really felt like, oh my God, how are we possibly going to get this done? But so many people just kept volunteering their time that we thought, actually, if we kind of put a call out and say, we'd like to have X many people across these days, is anyone free? We had more people than we could fit in the building. We had to sort of turn people away, and it was incredible. It was such a community effort. The whole thing has felt like such a community effort, and now it's such a wonderful community space as well. It's really incredible.
I know it's cold today, but I have literally just got goosebumps, not to be all cheesy, but I feel like when you walk into the shop, you can almost feel everyone's like energy in there. Like you walk in and it just feels calm and happy. And I don't know, like that, like you say, so many people put time into that. I mean, of course, most of all, you and Liam. And I'm sorry to make you relive the trauma of last year by sharing that story in the detail that you have. But I kind of just wanted to emphasize that in terms of a self-trust story, yours was a freaking long one. Like, you really had to hold the faith. But the community that you've built over the years with Paper and Word and, just with the book sleeves and then everything else you've added, it was incredible to see that, like, really physically manifest last year. Like, everyone got on board with the Kickstarter, and then as many people as could locally then, like, literally came with a paintbrush in hand to help make it. It was incredible. So I was so emotional. Not to make this about me, but I was so emotional on opening weekend. I don't know how you felt, Abby.
It was insane. It was so. I just didn't expect it. And honestly, one of the reasons, kind of my secret reason for wanting to open the bookshop, is because I had been working from home, like in my little cave, for, like 4-5 years. And I was just lonely. We had a really great community online, and I was never ever short of people to talk to. But it's just not the same as being around people physically, and having those sort of micro interactions of a stereotypical workplace where you're making a cup of tea and you're like, oh, how was your weekend? And all of that sort of thing. Like, it just felt like that was missing. And I think, again, because of the timing of when I left my other job, with it being during COVID, right at the start of that, it felt like when the world opened back up and everyone went back to work, I just didn't.
Yeah.
And it felt like I was still stuck in this odd, like, COVID bubble, I guess. And so, that was another reason for it, was to have that community again. Having been a cave gremlin for so long, I really didn't expect that so many people would show up, both online for the Kickstarter and for sharing it and all of that, but also to then, turning up to help paint or joining the book club and all of these physical things. And I think, something that makes the bookshop so special is all of these people that poured themselves into it. We have names on the ceilings from people that backed the Kickstarter, and it's just so crazy to me that this thing that I did as a cave gremlin has turned into this massive in-person community, and everyone that walks through the door can feel it. Like you said, there's everyone that comes in. I think because we are a very specialist bookshop, because we only do fantasy, you're walking in as a lover of fantasy, and everybody in there you already know is a friend because they love the same things that you do. And so, whether it's us behind the counter, the girls that work as part of the team, or whether it's just other customers in the shop, everyone is always just so excited and so happy and chatting to each other and giving each other book recommendations or chiming in on a conversation where they're like, oh, this kind of sounds good. And someone's like, I've read that and it's amazing, you'll love it. And it's just incredible to behold. Sometimes, I just stand there and I'm like, how did this happen? How did I make this? It's wild.
And I know you're too humble to shout this out, but opening weekend, you had 3-hour queues out the door. Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Literally, I'd kind of, was sort of secretly saying, like, oh, if we've got a few little people waiting outside when we open, I'll be made up. You know, if there's like 5 or 10 people waiting by the time we open the door, that would be really cool. And we got there sort of 45 minutes to an hour-ish, I think, before we opened, because we'd been working till like gone midnight the night before trying to get everything ready. And there was already a few people outside, and I was like, yes, you know, achieved. And then we did like our last minute stuff inside, and then we opened the door and I stepped outside to like say hello and come in, and I couldn't see the end of the queue. Like it had gone right down to the other end of the village. And it stayed like that all day. We had to put Liam on the door just to monitor the number of people coming in, because it's only a small shop, and you know, we didn't want everyone to get squished and not enjoy being inside. So yeah, it was a 3-hour wait for everyone the whole day, but people were thrilled to be waiting and, you know, happy to join the queue, and they were making friends in the queue and sending people on coffee runs, and it was crazy. It was absolutely crazy. We had to stop people joining the queue about 2:30, assuming, you know, we were closing at 5, and, you know, it gave us a bit of leeway, and we still ended up opening, you know, an hour extra than we thought. But we covered more than our full year's rent on that first day. It was
so incredible.
It's wild. And that continued to happen for another few days as well.
Should not have had this podcast recording on the first day of my period, because I'm just sat here like, oh, do not cry. I'm just so happy. Incredible. Wouldn't it be cool ifs? I might have to get you to write some down for me, because your wouldn't it be cool ifs have just happened in such a way. Even that, like, oh, wouldn't it be nice if we had like a couple of people outside? Queue 3 hours long down the high street.
I know. I don't know. I don't know how it happens. It feels so crazy. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm pretty hard on myself as well. And, you know, I'm always thinking that I'm not doing enough. And, you know, stepping back and looking at it from the outside, and I'm like, you know, if this is what feels like, you know, sort of 70%, what could I do if I felt like I gave 100, you know?
Goodness me. I don't know how what you guys achieved over the last year can't be anything like, it's nothing less than 150%. It was crazy what you guys have achieved. And also, just to point out, you have a young son as well. Like, you guys are superhuman.
Yeah, we have a 5-year-old, and he fortunately loves books, loves reading, loves the bookshop. He's recently decided he can't be bothered to go to the bookshop. You know, like if the last couple of weeks he's like eye rolling if he has to go. But I mean, we're very fortunate in that, you know, Liam's job is quite flexible and he works part-time, so, you know, he is there for our little boy around what I can be there, so he does very rarely have to actually come to the bookshop. But yeah, when we were doing it up, he did spend a lot of time there with us, and because it was so cold as well, because it was over winter, we've got photos of him just bundled up in everybody's coats with blankets and cushions, like sat with the iPad with his headphones on, like on top of the till and things like that. And the night before we opened, possibly the day before that actually, when all of the books had arrived, we'd got them on the shelves but we hadn't alphabetized them yet, which took way longer than we expected. And, you know, that was a full team effort. There was maybe about 6 of us doing that, including Kathy from Kraken, which is the comic book store a few doors down from us. She'd popped in just like, do you need any help? And I was just burst into tears and was like, it's all taking so long. Kathy stayed till like 11 o'clock, I think, just helping us alphabetize the books, and our little boy was there with us that night, and he ended up falling asleep on the armchairs, and we decided, actually, this is good, we'll stay, we'll get the rest done. And yeah, we all just like tucked him in with our coats and pushed the chairs together so that he could have like a little bed, and we just like alphabetized in silence whilst he slept on the chairs. And, you know, I think that night especially, I felt terrible, you know, that we were sort of putting him through that, I guess. But it was Kathy from Kraken that said, can you think of anything cooler than growing up in a bookshop?
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, yeah, actually, they're really nice memories to think back on. You know, that one night that you fell asleep in the bookshop. Yeah, that made me feel better. Yeah,
it's
she
so cool.
has a kid as well that, you know, grows up in her comic book shop. And actually, that's a really lovely thing to do. So, yeah.
Yeah, and again, shouldn't be saying this when I'm as emotional as I am today, but like what incredible role models he has in you and Liam, because the resilience that you had to have last year through all of that frustration, and then the actual just physical graft you had to then put in to turn it around and get it open was amazing. And like, I know he's only 5, but somewhere subconsciously, he will have seen the community show up for you guys in the way that they did. And that is just stunning. I need to find words. So I just like, don't make yourself cry. But yeah, what an incredible thing for him to have been part of. He'll love looking at the vlogs and the pictures and everything one day. Like, that is really cool. Even if he's in a phase of rolling his eyes right now. Give him another few months, he'll be back in a phase of wanting to hang off the rolling ladder.
But yeah, oh, he loves doing that. And, you know, he kind of thinks of the kids section in the bookshop, because we do all ages, even though we're fantasy only, we do, you know, fantasy kids books. And so, you know, if he thinks of the shelves in there as an extension of his own library, I guess. And so he'll walk in and he'll see a book that we don't have at home, and he's like, excuse me? What is this? Why have you not brought one of these home? And yeah, okay, all right, yeah. So yeah, he absolutely loves reading and loves books, thankfully. But yeah, he played a part in it, you know, even the decorating and the building. I filmed the whole thing for YouTube, just as, because everything was taking so long, and I'd made this like big song and dance about opening a bookshop and doing a Kickstarter, and then it didn't happen. I was like, shit, you know, what can I do to keep people engaged when I don't even have anything to tell them? You know, all I can tell them is what I'm being told, which is hopefully next week. So the content that I put out during that time was what I was being told, the progress that we were making in the background, and the dramas we were having with the building. And actually, I really think that that worked in our favour, because people were so invested. You know, they'd already been financially invested, and now they were sort of emotionally invested in this ride that we were all on, and it definitely helped. So we filmed everything for YouTube as well, and I'm still working through that, because it was so crazy when we then opened that I was so behind on editing. So I think in the editing process currently as we speak, I think I'm 2 to 3 weeks before we actually opened at this point. And that is my plan for this afternoon, is to edit the next week's worth of stuff. But yeah, there's, you know, he's in some of those videos building, hammering stuff together, or, you know, just sitting in one of the shelves eating snacks. He was doing the paint testers on the wall, so the way that we've built the bookshelves, the walls kind of exposed behind them, I guess. We didn't bother painting behind them, because why would we spend the time doing that to cover them? So all of our little boy's paint testers were Transformers. So the wall is covered in like an army of purple Transformers behind the bookshelves, which, you know, someone will uncover one day, and that's
so fun.
A really cute thing to think about.
That's like a really nice little like, well, I mean, now everyone listening to this knows it, but it's a nice little thing that, you know, behind that particular bookshelf is a load of purple Transformers.
Optimus Prime over behind that one, yeah. Starscream down there.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I know it was probably equal measures the most exciting and most, I don't know, difficult year.
Yeah.
Going through all of that, but it is an incredible story of community and self-trust, of course, and just holding the faith that it was all going to be worth it. And my goodness me, it is.
Yeah, thank God, because yeah, it was a hard year. It was hard, you know, from a mental health point of view, I guess. You know, it's very difficult to be in that constant state of limbo, and even from, you know, planning the business as well, when we're being told something will happen next week that is going to change everything, it's very hard to plan what your next move is within the business. So that made it very difficult in every way. You know, it made it very difficult financially. We had to borrow money last year just to get through everything, and fortunately, you know, within 4 months of the shop being open, because it's done so well, we've paid everything off. We kind of, you know, we're back where we wanted to be. And yeah, it was absolutely a year of just blindly believing that it would all work out in the end.
And all fueled by just a pure love of books, which I think is honestly it's what's made all of this work. Like, it's what helped you get through last year, but also, like, with the content that you were never sharing it in a, like, woe is me, I just want you to all, like, you weren't trying to force people to be emotionally invested. They were, because it was just so genuine. Like, everything that you've shared was just real.
Mm.
And I think that's just something that we all crave and all appreciate in this day and age, is just real. And I think you could feel that through the screen.
Yeah, I tried really hard not to be too negative because I don't know, I felt so crap that I didn't want to kind of, be putting that online as well, because I really needed people to stay excited so that I felt better, but also obviously so that they then were excited about the bookshop and turned up. But yeah, there were definitely a few points where there was no light at the end of the tunnel. It was really difficult. I think there was one particular Kickstarter update, because we have to, once the Kickstarter finishes, you're supposed to put updates until, everything's sort of delivered, I guess, which in our case was the bookshop was open.
Yeah.
And yeah, there was one update that I remember just sitting in floods of tears, writing, just so fed up, and just saying, I have nothing to tell you because it just keeps going backwards. And, I don't know. There was a point where we'd sort of said, I don't know how we're going to make it there. I don't know how we're supposed to, like, financially get to this point when we're just spending all of this money and nothing is coming back in because the shop wasn't open. We'd been told, because we thought it would be such a short space of time, we'd spent money on resources and stuff to, do the shop up and stock and things like that. And our house was just floor to ceiling, wall to wall boxes of lights or books or wood and, all of this stuff. And yeah, we did get there in the end, and I think that that community excitement was a big part of keeping going. And so many people come into the shop, every single day somebody comes in and says, oh, we followed it on YouTube, or we saw it on Instagram, or we saw everything that was happening. And
That's so good.
yeah, it's crazy. I think, it did work really well for us, even though it felt like shit at the time. I think it did actually help us, from like a marketing point of view. Not a marketing plan that I would recommend, but, making the most out of a bad situation for sure.
Yeah. And I think sometimes it's easier, or not easier, I don't know what the word is, but you feel like you're accountable to other people, like feeling like you've got to deliver something for someone else is a different kind of motivation sometimes than just like wanting it done for yourself.
Absolutely. And we had their money, because the Kickstarter money comes through about, I think it was about 3 weeks, something like that. It was definitely within a month of the Kickstarter finishing. And, that was like £26,000 almost, because of, all of their fees and stuff that they take off, that was just transferred into my account one day. And that was other people's money. That was other people's money for the bookshop. So that went into a pot and sat there, and, we didn't touch that. Even when we were stuck, even when we then had to borrow money to kind of keep going last year, that was other people's money for the bookshop. So that still sat there, and, that was a huge weight,
Mm-hmm.
of extra reason to do this, because we had to. It didn't feel like we could change our minds by any means. It felt like, regardless of how long it took or what it took out of us, we had to do this thing. And I kind of, in hindsight, I'm kind of glad of that, because it did just keep us going. But it was a lot of pressure.
At the time, like, damn it, I am stuck in this. Oh, I'm so proud of you.
Thanks, pal.
You did such a good job. It's so pretty. I took a couple of my uni friends 2 weeks ago, I think.
Yeah.
One from London, one from Birmingham, and the shop's on the Wirral, like northwest, if you don't know where that is. I will obviously leave all the links in the show notes, by the way. And if you can't get to the physical shop, you can still like purchase online and through, is it Libro? Is that how you say it? The audiobook platform?
Yeah, so you can, like, we have all of our in-store stock online, and you can, pre-order any books with us or send any book requests, etc. And then we have Libro FM, which is the audiobook platform. So it's like, the other one, but doesn't support Bezos, supports independent bookshops, which is great. That's what we like. And bookshop.org as well. You can use us on there if you want to buy random stuff that isn't fantasy that we don't have. And again, we get like a cut of that. So you don't have to be close to be involved. Even our book club, we have an online version of that we have about 200 people in.
Wow, that's
So yeah,
incredible.
that's good fun. Lots of book chats in there.
Fun. If you like books, be in Abby's world. Like if you like books in any capacity,
Yeah.
Abby is your guy. Yeah, I'm so glad our paths crossed. My northern pal on the first retreat we went to, we're the only northerners.
Yeah, we were, weren't we? Yeah, everyone else seemed to be mostly London-ish, but
Yeah.
definitely all in the south. Yeah, it was good. I think we needed each other. I feel like our businesses have been in very similar positions. We've had very similar feelings about them, and it's been really lovely to be able to have another like self-employed person to talk to. Makes such a difference, doesn't it? Because we can say shit to each other that you could say to another friend, but they wouldn't understand it in the same way. Yeah, you've been a big part of my sanity, especially last year when I just wanted to crawl into a hole and cry.
I'm glad that's all with hindsight now.
Yes, me too.
It's very nice to like look back and be like, oh, that was shit for a very long time.
Lol.
Past tense.
Yeah, we did keep saying that to each other as well. We kept saying, like, next year we'll look back on this and laugh. I mean, yeah, God. Yeah.
With the dark sense of humour, we can laugh.
Yeah.
Haha, lol, that was really fucking depressing. But yeah, I'm really glad that you have come on and shared that story. And yeah, we're sort of a year on from the Kickstarter, and reflecting on that last year is just absolutely crazy. So yeah, thank you so much. We have a tradition on the podcast of sharing a cheesy quote, a life mantra, just some little cheesy quote that you live by. As you are a collector of books, I am a collector of cheesy quotes because I just think that they can perk you up. If things aren't like, if things are bad, but they're not like 1,000% in the bin bad, reading the right cheesy quote can just really
Yeah, I'm with you
flip
there.
your mindset. Yeah. And that in itself was one of my little cheesy quotes that got me through a rough time. Was like, if I can read a quote and it helps, then things can't be that bad.
It's so true though. I like that.
A bit of cheesy quote inception. So do you have anything that you would like to share to end the episode on?
Do you know what? Yeah, I don't know whether it would make your wall of cheesy quotes, but
Always.
there's kind of two things that me and Liam live by. We have both had some very shit jobs in our lifetime that have made us feel terrible. And, not so much from a quote point of view, but after the second time that happened and one of us had a horrendous job, we said that was it. We weren't doing that again. That was not something that we accept for our lives.
I like that. We do not.
We'd said, no, we do not accept this. This is not what we want. And from that moment on, we'd said that we would always chase joy. It doesn't matter what that path looked like, that we would always chase joy over something that felt sensible but soul destroying. So I guess that is our first thing, is a cheesy, yes, not quite right on your wall quote, but we would always chase joy. And then the second thing for us, which is I guess a bit more quotable, is we always say, if it's not a hell yeah, it's a hell no. And that's kind of how we make all of our decisions. If we're teetering on the edge, if we feel like, then it's a no. Because if it's not a hell yeah, then it's a hell no. We don't have time for something in the middle that's unexciting. And we make a lot of decisions that way. And sometimes it doesn't happen straight away. We'll talk about something for weeks and try and figure it out, or talk our way around it in some way, and then one of us will go, hang on, If it's not a hell yeah, it's a hell no. And then it's out, it's done, we've moved on. And I think that, just that mantra and chasing joy is what's got us here. And it doesn't mean that it's an easy road. It doesn't mean that every part of that journey is joyful by any means. But it does mean that, that purpose, what is keeping us going, and the result that we want at the end is for the right reasons. May, are you crying?
You two are just my favourite humans. You're just, oh, what a perfect ending to the episode. I'm not even going to talk. I'm going to leave all of your links in the show notes and shut up because that was stunning. Thank you so, so much for joining us, Abby. And yeah, have a gorgeous rest of your day. Enjoy that. And I will be back in your ears next week.